So today, let's pull back the curtain on something we all do every day. Eat. Because it's not magic that keeps our grocery store stocked. Nope, it's a massive, incredibly detailed system of planning. We're going to break down the blueprint for how it all actually works. I mean, really think about it. You see the food on your plate, you know it came from the store, but have you ever stopped to wonder about the huge chain of decisions that brought it to you? We're talking logistics, resource management, just the sheer amount of planning is staggering. And that journey is the real story we're diving into. At its core, feeding the world is this giant, high-stakes balancing act. On one side, you have billions of people who all need to eat. And on the other, you have the planet's limited resources. The land, the fresh water, all of it. And figuring out how to manage that tension, that is probably the single most important challenge for our survival. So, how do we even begin to tackle a task that big? Well, if you strip away all the complicated stuff, our entire global food system really boils down to just three main sources. Yep, everything we eat comes from one of these three pillars. You've got the land, which grows our crops. You've got animals, which give us all sorts of protein. And of course, you've got the water, home to all our seafood. And believe me, each one has its own unique playbook for growth. All right, let's start with the big one, the absolute foundation of civilization itself. Agriculture. This is the blueprint for how we get food from the land. And the land gives us so much. We get the staples that really form the bedrock of what everyone eats, cereals like rice and wheat that feed billions of people. It also gives us protein-rich pulses, and of course, all the vitamins and minerals from tons of different fruits and vegetables. A good harvest is never, ever an accident. It's this whole chain of really smart decisions. It all starts with checking out the land, not just how much there is, but is the soil any good? Then you've got to secure water, which is a huge deal in so many places. After that comes picking the right seeds and fertilizers, which is this whole strategic game of balancing how much you can grow versus how tough the plants are. And finally, you have to get all the people and the machines organized at just the right time. Seriously, one weak link in that chain can mess up the entire season. Now, land isn't just for growing crops. It's also the foundation for our second pillar, because it's where we raise the animals we rely on for food. Right, so animal farming gives us some of the most packed sources of protein and nutrients out there, things like milk, eggs, and meat. And what's really cool is that a lot of these animals can eat stuff that we can't, like grass, and turn it into really valuable food for us. And just like with crops, this takes a ton of planning. You have to manage the animal population through breeding to get better results and keep them healthy. But honestly, the bigger challenge is planning for their food. Making sure you have a steady, affordable supply of feed is really the economic backbone of the entire livestock industry. Okay, let's move on to our third and final pillar. This source covers more than 70% of our planet, but it definitely comes with its own set of challenges. We're talking about the incredible bounty that comes from our waters. So our seafood comes from two very different places. You've got marine fishing, which happens in the huge open oceans. But then you also have inland fishing, which is just as important, from places like rivers, lakes, and ponds. And, managing a wild ocean fishery is a totally different ballgame from managing, say, a river system. Now, with more and more people wanting seafood, we've had to get creative to avoid emptying our oceans. And that's where pisciculture, which is just a fancy word for fish farming, comes into play. By shifting from just catching wild fish to actually farming them, we can manage everything much more predictably. It's basically the agricultural revolution, but for water. So, we've been talking about food systems on this huge, global scale. But what happens if we take all those same ideas, all that planning, and shrink it way down to something we can do ourselves? Well, that's exactly what a kitchen garden is. It's like your own personal, micro-sized food system. It can be a little plot in your backyard, or even just a few pots on a balcony. You're basically applying the same principles of agricultural planning, but just for your own home. And the benefits? They're amazing. You get access to the freshest possible fruits and vegetables, but I think more importantly, you get this sense of control. You decide what goes into the soil, you decide what seeds to plant, and you get to say no thanks to synthetic chemicals if you want. And getting started is all about thinking like a planner. First, you just look at what you've got, how much space, how much sunlight. Second, you make smart choices by planting things that are in season because they're going to have a much better chance of growing well. And finally, you just manage your little plot by giving each plant enough room to do its thing. Simple as that.
Okay, so we've looked at everything from massive global supply chains all the way down to a tiny backyard plot. What's the one big idea that ties it all together?
Well, let's just do a quick recap. Our entire food supply comes from managing those three big sources: land, animals, and water. We've seen that smart, strategic planning is absolutely essential to making it all work on a global scale. And, on a personal level, a simple kitchen garden lets us use those very same principles to boost our own health and well-being.
In the end, it doesn't matter if you're managing a country's food supply or just a single tomato plant. The principle is the same. To grow smart is to eat healthy. So, next time you sit down to eat, maybe just take a second to think about the incredible and mostly invisible chain of planning that brought that meal to your plate.